dedicated to the issue of digital technologies and the environment synergy for future. My name is Teresa Horeisova from DiploFoundation, and it will be my pleasure to be your moderator for today's discussion. The report that we will present today is a result of an excellent cooperation that we have had with the Konrad-Adenauer-Foundation, Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, and their office in Washington, DC. And we would really like you to use the opportunity of this event to make it as interactive as possible. For that, I will be helped by my colleague, Mrs. Katarina Angelkovic, who will be the chat moderator. And she will be monitoring the chat and making sure that any reflections, concerns, and questions that you have are brought up to our speakers. We would particularly like to hear from you, policymakers. What are your biggest concerns when it comes to environment and digital technologies? Welcome to all of you joining us here on Zoom. This event is also live streamed on Facebook and on YouTube. So welcome also to our viewers there, and also to those of you who will be watching the recording later on. As I said, we have partnered on this with the Konrad-Adenauer-Foundation. And before we dig into the report and its findings and have a panel discussion on this topic, I would like to give this opportunity now to Mr. Paul Linard, who is the director of the CAS USA office in Washington, DC, to give us a few opening remarks. Paul, if I may, over to you.
Thank you, dear Teresa. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends on both sides of the Atlantic. And from what I know, we might even have some participants from Asia, so beyond Europe and the United States. On behalf of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, I welcome you to today's event, the launch of the report Digital Technology and the Environment, a Synergy for the Future. And as Teresa mentioned, I'm the director of the KS office in the United States of America, based in Washington, D.C., one of over 100 offices of the German Political Foundation across the globe. The Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, or Konrad-Adenauer-Foundation, named after Germany's first chancellor after World War II, is committed nationally and internationally to achieving and maintaining peace, freedom, and justice through civic education, events, and publication. We promote and preserve free democracy, the social market economy, and the development and consolidation of the value consensus. Our work in the US focuses on the strengthening of transatlantic relations, fostering and expanding strong institutional and individual connections between stakeholders, and the understanding of established and emerging political issues in the US, Europe, and of course in Germany. One of the prominent themes in our portfolio is centered around digital governance, innovation, and security. This is why today I'm especially pleased to be part of this event and very honored to be thanking Diplo US for authoring this exceptionally timely and important report. While digital innovation is one of the core pillars of our global work, we are equally aware of the challenges that lie ahead of us when it comes to the protection of the environment and the acceleration of climate change. The report provides us with an outstanding service, from my point of view, by illuminating the intersection of the environment and the expanding digital world, highlighting the opportunities that digital solutions can bring to the protection of the environment, while also pointing to the potential adverse effects of digital technologies. Diplo US analyzed both the challenges and opportunities in a thorough and yet accessible manner, and also through the lens of governance strategies on the transnational and national levels. As always, with this event today and with the report in particular, we hope to contribute to the strengthening of the transatlantic partnership and increased mutual understanding in key policy fields. In closing, dear Teresa, dear Pavlina, Elias, thank you so much for your exceptional work on this publication and this event. I speak for everybody at the Konrad-Adenauer-Foundation when I express our sincere gratitude for this successful cooperation between you and KAS. Now, I hope everybody is going to enjoy the presentation and the following Q&A discussion. Again, I thank everybody for joining us today. Teresa, back to you.
Dear Paul, thank you for these kind words. I can also say that also from our point of view, the cooperation with the Konrad-Adenauer-Foundation has been really smooth and excellent. And we also are grateful for the opportunity to work on this research with you. So after these welcoming remarks, I would like to pass for what I hope is the reason why you are here at this event, to learn more about what the report on the intersection of digital technologies and environment in the transatlantic context, as Paul explained, what findings we have to bring you. And for that, we have two speakers to exchange on this topic in this panel. The main one, because she's the lead researcher of this report, is Mrs. Pavlina Itelson, who is based in Diplo's office in the United States and is also the newly appointed executive director of Diplo US. Pavlina has been the main author, although this obviously was a bigger team effort. And she will be joined in this discussion by Mr. Ilias Iakodidis, who is working at DG Connect at the European Commission on green digital transformation. As we are speaking now, you can download the report already on our website. I would kind of like to ask Katarina to drop the link in the chat, but without further ado, it's over to you, Pavlina.
Thank you, Teresa. No, I can only add to the words of great cooperation with CAS. One of them causing actual problem with the report itself, because we were given quite a wide range of freedom in choosing the topic on nexus of digital development and environment. And in this topic, of course, which is a cross-sectional and very fast moving, that was the first challenge we faced. So we started with the German digital policy agenda for the environment, the first European complete agenda about the digital developments and how they can impact the environment and how can environment benefit from the technological developments. Looking from the perspective of the Western world, from the transatlantic perspective, and on both sides, both polluters and both entities which can contribute to change in the environment through the technical development, because they do have the position to do so in the international fora and as well as the developed economies. We looked at this topic through the lens of circular economy. Circular economy is something that, of course, everybody knows we need to transfer to in order to have a sustainable green future. Within this, and I ask my colleagues to show maybe the second slide, please. We have developed the purpose of the report, and we went for something very accessible for those who do not have yet policies about digital technologies and environment. So we did a little overview of interactions. Then we mapped the whole main fora where the issues are discussed, and we mapped current initiatives between the US, EU, and Germany. And we did this with 3 topics only, because the range of the topics is wide, but we picked 3. And that was raw materials, meaning rare earths, which is one of the most strongly debated strategic points on both sides of the Atlantic. Greenhouse gases, which is the main agenda on the international fora and the main driver for actually climate change. And the third one, we chose the e-waste, which is the emerging topic in the international fora. And my colleagues will show you in the next slide, please. Thank you. Is it? Giovanna, if you could be so kind to show the next slide about the rare earths. There we go. So this topic is recognized by the US, by the EU, and Germany as strategic defense point. All 3 of these entities do have certain policies about this and are in sync in addressing the dependence on rare earth from non-market economies and third sources. In the United States, the 90% of rare earths which are needed for basically manufacturing digital technology are coming from China. In EU, it's 80%. And as you might have seen, this topic was highly on the agenda also with the supply chain vulnerability in the last month. We have mapped the fora where this is discussed, of course, not all of them, because it goes into fora related to trade and related to other issues. But within the environment issues, these rare earths and dependence on them were discussed at G7, G20, and of course, US-EU Trade and Technology Council. The second working group and third working group are dealing with these issues. They are high on the agenda, as I said, and even this week, the European trade ministers met to discuss how to proceed in addressing the dependence on rare earths from China mainly. Next slide would be the greenhouse gases, and that is something which is high on the international agenda, which actually within the mapping took the most time, and the content is very much detailed on this. We have focused on the CO2 emissions and energy consumptions by the digital technologies, and we will talk about in a Q&A section a little bit more about this, so I'll leave it to that. And the need for sustainable green energy, meaning moving from coal energy, moving from non-renewable sources of energy into sustainable energy sources for the digital technology to function. This is also the area where the digital technologies are mostly implemented through smart grids, through IoT or AI solutions. So we have mapped that as well. And international fora, and that was the hard part, because this topic is discussed from the point of view of environment, from the point of view of energy, from the point of view of digital technologies, and from the point of view of development and financing. So there are a lot of entities which deal with this, including European Green, and I believe it should say Digital Coalition, which is a coalition of private companies dealing with the issues of greenhouse gases and the environment and technology intersection. Again, it is on the international agenda within the transatlantic context. It is at the US-EU Trade and Technology Council at Working Group 2 at G7. There is a US-German Climate and Energy Partnership, which deals with these issues. And as we all know, these negotiations, especially within the TTC, are taking place now and are going very much into detail on all the issues. But I will really like to discuss this with Elias in a little bit. So let's move to the third slide, and that would be the e-waste discussion, which is an up-and-coming topic on the international agenda. So end of life of digital devices and their recycling, and basically keeping the cradle-to-cradle sustainable model of economy is something which needs to be adopted and is discussed at the ITU, at the UN Environmental Protection Agency, ILO, and other areas. This is where we found also the biggest convergence between the approaches between the United States, EU, and Germany. In the sense that EU and Germany do have very developed sustainable and circular economy policies, whereas in the US, these policies are mainly on the state level. Of course, US EPA and the Department of Energy are working on these issues, but as far as overarching policy compared, for example, to the digital policy agenda for the environment in Germany, we did not find anything like that in the US. As far as the conclusions, it is hard. There are very various avenues of cooperation between the US and Germany and EU on these issues. They do not take place only at the TTC. They do take place within the other international organizations, like I would like to point out the ITUT, the fifth study group with Germany, and both in Germany and US are very active, and also as a forum where other stakeholders can have input. So it will not be, just like the issue, it will not be a straightforward one fora policy issue which would be discussed and closed. I would like to also hear your reflections as professionals from our participants on what do you think is the main issue here? What do you think the fora should be focused on? And also maybe from perspective of other countries than just the two Western transatlantic positions that we mapped. So thank you. That is all from me. Teresa, back to you.
Thank you very much for that, Pavlina, and for presenting kind of the focus of the report and the main findings. Once again, reminder to those of you who have joined us late, the report is downloadable for free on our website. The link is in the chat. Now, going to you, Ilias, if I can ask you for some more general reflections first. First of all, on obviously findings of the report, but also in general on the nexus between digital technologies and the environment. Over to you, to Brussels.
No, thank you. Thank you, Teresa. Pleasure to be here. I want to tell you that everybody in the audience knows what green transition is. So we know what it is and we see the need for it. Not everybody in the audience understands and sees the needs for the digital transition, but it's happening. We are experiencing it. Okay, some of them understand the need now in the COVID and what happened and what we actually managed to save as jobs working from distance or the teleeducation. So the green is better understood. The digital is more experienced because it's happening in front of our eyes and it's very fast moving, and our reptile brains are kind of wired to see what's fast moving than what's slow moving. That's why we don't see other transitions like demographic transitions, because they are very slow and nobody pays attention to that as much. Now the nexus is very difficult because those two transitions were living in parallel universes. So the green transition people for 50 years be talking, there is a community, there are principles, there are major gatherings. Same on digital part, but those two worlds didn't interact. So if I ask the audience, what do you think is the nexus? I bet you would see about half of it, what's really happening there. What I could do, I just display one slide just to explain the nexus in a little bit more easy way to understand, and that is, there are two major issues, the conflicts, and they dominate in the media. So what you really mostly hear about is the conflict between the digital and the green, because you hear about Bitcoins, you hear about data centers, you hear about all these terawatts of energy that goes to ICT, and you hear about e-waste, the fastest growing category, and then Paulina very nicely described the problems there. So conflict dominates. But the conflict is the conflict of the 3% of total emissions that ICT represents. What you hear less about is the synergies, and the synergies is what we need. If we're going to save ourselves, it's to make synergies work, not to solve the conflict. That's my basic message of today. The synergies, we have blind eye what we can really do. And there are two types of synergies. What can digital do for green? We have to make circular economy work. And that's why I like very much the report, because circular economy is the major issue. Climate change is the derivative of it. I mean, if we solve the product sustainability, if we solve the manufacturing issues, if we solve the emissions of industry, that is 50% of the emissions is the non-circularity of our industry, then we have a chance. And that's where you cannot move without digital. Digital is the necessary condition for moving to circular economy, but it has to be green digital. And there is another aspect that nobody really talks about, and that is what can green transition do for digital world, for the digital sector? And that's huge opportunities of new business models, product as a service, tracking, tracing of products, materials to make sure that circular economy works. It's new jobs, huge potential of new sustainable business models that are, very much benefiting ICT sector. thank you. I'll stay here and we're gonna go more into Q&A. Yeah.
Well, definitely, Elias. No, thank you also for these explanations. Now, when we were preparing for this event, we did a little social media survey, and thank you to those of you who have actually participated in that. And in this survey, we kind of asked, what is, in your opinion, the main issue on the intersection of digital developments and the environment? Now, Pavlina, if from the answers, but also from your experience, you could pick one or two, what would you go for?
Thank you, Teresa. First, I would like to very much reflect Elias's point about having a very positive attitude towards implementing technological developments in solving the environmental issues. It is true that the media is always about bringing up the worst and most interesting headlines. How much, does it cost for you to click on Google, or how much impact does it have when we are sitting now in Zoom on the poor environment? However, it doesn't see the bigger picture. I completely agree there. Talking about the main issue, and for me, that issue is connected on the side of digital to the notion of open internet, notion of interconnected internet. Is data. A lot of international organizations, including the World Meteorological Organization, now where Teresa is standing in the same building, do a lot of work on mapping the environment, mapping the earth, mapping the changes, and all this data has a great potential of being implemented for the solutions. So one thing is that, for example, climate modeling has been done through 1960s. And even with those rudimentary computers and basic data, scientists were able to predict properly how the climate will change. So any kind of predictions which were done since the 60s, more or less within the time, proved to be correct. Now imagine now that we have this much data, which apparently is now 70 petabytes, and in 5 years, it's supposed to be around 600 petabytes. What can we do with that? What kind of impact can they have with the implementing of AI, with the implementation of quantum computing, on actually modeling how the climate change would look like in the future, on modeling how our policies, which we plan today, can impact for anything from basically environment, but it goes beyond, as Elias says, it goes about the changes to the government, e-government. It goes to the impacts we cannot even assess right now because we do not have the understanding of the complexity fully. And for me, that is something which is very exciting, and very much something which should be implemented in the future. So for me, the main issue is actually, we can do something. It is, what is it, and how do we do it right? We don't want to start implementing certain technologies which will have negative effects down the line or in the future. And that has something to do with the work which international organizations are doing right now at, for example, as I mentioned, the ITU, the fifth study group, which works with the data and the assessment of how technology impacts the environment and the related methodologies. So that's it for me for now.
No, thank you, Pavlina, for complicating it further. And indeed, data and environment is quite a topic, yes, that we have covered in Diplo's work, but is also really looked at closely by many other actors. Thank you also for having the questions in the chat coming. We will get to them in a minute. Let's collect a few more. And before we do so, I would also like to go to you, Elias. So if we talk about green digital twin transition, so what can we concretely do to see the benefits?
What can we concretely do is to see how ICT is the power to get a triple win. So if I had to select what is important for the next steps, is first of all, kind of a governance and awareness and understanding that digital is a tool. Well-being and sustainability is the goal. Don't confuse goals with tools. And because there is so much power and so much misunderstanding about what digital transition is about, people see that as a goal in itself. Of course, there is a goal to make sure, because the today's wars and cyber wars, we live in this cyber physical world, and the cyber world is becoming as important as the physical world. But the physical, we have to ensure our sustainability and survival. So we should not mix so much the means and the goals. So the goal is well-being and sustainability. The means is digital. The digital has to be put in a way into some kind of a sustainability box with several principles. The way we're developing principles for ethical use of AI, we have to develop principles for green use of ICT, but in a way that it's profitable and people see it as attractive. And there is a question in the chat that we'll come back to. So what I see is that we have to, for the first time in history, put in the room this triple win, which is economics, social and environmental gains through digital. And that is not obvious because digital is very good getting economic gains. It's struggling, but it's getting there with respect to social gains. But it has never worked with respect to environmental gains. But that triple win is what we need to put around the table. And it's before we discuss which technology is good, because as usual, people take AI and blockchain and 5G, and they are like, driven by technology, thinking I have the answer to all the problems. But we need to reverse. We have to come back, redesigning the future of tomorrow, and see how ICT will get us there. And it will get us, and it has the power to get us there on a triple win train. But that is not obvious train. Not all digitalizations have triple win. Very small subset of what we're doing in digitalization will get us triple win. And the first thing we have to do is to design those boundaries. That's why we work with European Green Digital Coalition to say, under which condition precision farming pilot or connected mobility pilot or smart grids will give you triple win. And those conditions are not obvious. They are not obvious at all. You would be surprised how many rebound effects beyond which, once you get out of those boundaries, you're actually doing harm. And that is something that is not well understood. And we need to have standardized. That's why I'm talking to ITU, I'm talking to standardization organizations and NGOs. We have to have a very clear guidelines what sustainability by design of digital solutions and digitalization looks like.
Well, thanks, Elias, for this realistic assessment. I think many will agree that those challenges that you have described in terms of the cross-silo, cross-disciplinary approach are not only an issue in the field of environment. We are facing it in many other areas, but it's also kind of a key in seeing the issues holistically. Now, I know that things are going on in the chat. So if you allow me, Katarina, would you be so kind and come on screen and share with us what's going on?
Yes, thank you, Teresa. We have received quite a few questions, and let me try to address them. Ginger asked that, she said that because while it only seems to be an additional cost, it is not a priority, green transition has to be important to implement. And how can green transition be made more attractive? And how can we emphasize the advantages for big tech? Elias has already addressed the question to some extent. Elena is also wondering if the study also looked into how US and Europe can concretely assist developing countries, for instance, African, Asian, and Latin American countries, to address the three main issues presented in the study. And looking at some of the other stakeholders, Katarina asked how involved or how receptive is the business sector, as in keeping the intersection of environment and digital technology in mind in all their activities. Is it mostly a matter of state regulation or incentive? And any suggestions for multi-stakeholder approaches that we know from the internet governance field? Back to you, Teresa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katarina. So three quite difficult questions. So on the first one, on how to make green transition a priority, how to make it more attractive, the question asked by Ginger. Thank you for that. Elias responded partly in the chat. So let me give you an opportunity, Pavlina, to react to this one.
Yes, in addition to what was already said, it is the matter of changing the behavior of consumers. So usually the environment and digital technology is related to natural sciences, but however, it looks like that we need to bring in some social sciences and some psychology and implement that to address the consumer behavior. I mean, there are incentives, of course. I mean, every state has their own incentives, for example, tax incentives for owning an e-car and such. But general change is slow, and it needs, I would say, more push from the government on the consumer change of the behavior. As far as the other question, Teresa, if you could repeat that, yes, that would be great.
The second one?
Yes.
The second question was asked by Elena, and that will be also then to Elias as well. Talking in the transatlantic context, how can we assist developing countries, especially in those three areas that were picked for kind of digging deeper in at our report? Maybe Elias, if you could react first, and I go back to Pavlina.
Yes, so two things. First of all, we're working with US under the TTC, as you know, Transatlantic Technology Council. And we are discussing a possibility to collaborate how to measure the beneficial part of green digital. How do we provide metrics to count the benefits of connected mobility, precision farming, smart grids, smart cities, smart manufacturing? How do we actually tame this beast to give a figure? Because what we want to do is to use green public procurement and public money to ask for these things if it's proven that it gives us triple win. Remember, profitable, socially acceptable, and socially beneficial, and environmentally good in the terms of avoiding or saving emissions or avoiding pollutions. So if we have such guidelines, how to deploy, I mean, we're discussing with the US administration how to kind of standardize and use that for third countries. I'm already talking to Africa because we have this week EU-Africa summit, and they are very keen to see how they can already benefit from this triple win of digitalization. And we're talking to World Bank, which today, and most of the promotional banks do not have metrics to spend money on digitalization and knowing and being able to tick the box, yes, this is sustainable finance. Same with the EU taxonomy. So the world out there that is spending money in development, they spend money on infrastructures, but they have no key or they have no metric to say, is this carbon intensive infrastructure or is it, is it green infrastructure? And they have no metrics of how to use this infrastructure for green goals. And on any of the sectors that I mentioned, that would be priority for them. So we do work with all the actors and many countries that are spending and having kind of a development programs to create some kind of guidelines. How do I spend my digital for development program in a way that it has also environmental benefits, at least no harm to environment?
Thank you, Elias. Pavlina, do you want to react to this question, or shall we go to the third one?
No, I can quickly react, and that is that as I said in the beginning, the report looks at this issue from the position of transatlantic cooperation and two Western economies. And many of us remember the statement from at the UN from one of the Pacific Island countries, with the person standing halfway into the water, and issue of, for example, greenhouse gases of e-waste is not that prominent in the countries that Diplo works with, for example, the small island countries or developing countries. They do have issues which are related to environment. They might not be these three issues, but they might be worried about, losing their territory to rising seas, to the ocean cleanliness, to, food supply and water supply. And it doesn't mean that just because it's not on the report, it's not a valid issue, or it doesn't have for example, technological solution to it. But as Ilias rightly said, there is no rule, there is no guidance so far on what can I implement, where do I invest in, so it has the effect we want on the environment, and that we can actually assess in metrics, how does it work? So that would be my reaction to that.
Thank you very much, Pavlina. Now, the third question asked by Katarina was on the role of the business sector. If I could ask you for brief reflections, because I know more questions are coming up and we have about 10 minutes to go. So, Elias?
Yes, I'm reading the Katarina's questions. Yes, it's both regulation, but also incentives to the market, and they can move much faster. So what we have done, for example, we are coming up as a commission with several regulatory proposals. Just in the next month, we will have a regulation on supporting consumers in the green transition. We will have a data act, how we have to better share data and provide data for many reasons, including green transition. We have a sustainable product initiative coming up end of March, where we'll introduce a concept, kind of a revolutionary concept of digital product passport, to track and trace materials and passports to make sure that we enable and facilitate circularity, repair, refurbishment, recycling, but also sustainable mining, avoiding child labor, kind of track and trace many of the things. So that will be put through regulation, but then we leave it to the market to find standards quickly, to work with standardization organizations, to build on the data they have, and to find B2B exchange of data that makes sense for business as well. So we will also have green claims to make sure that we put some kind of a order what you can say as a sustainable business. And just to come back to the first question, to complete the answer, big businesses know they have to be sustainable. They know they will not survive unless they are sustainable. And the era of greenwashing is over. So they have to prove it. They have to prove that they are sustainable. They cannot just put a label and say, trust me, I'm clean or I'm green. And for that, they need data. So they will look down their supply chains to say, look, you provide me the data behind all that recycled material you give me. You give me the footprint so I can bring it together with my manufacturing and give a correct footprinting. So they know that this is important. They know very much that the consumer is looking at that. But we need to make sure, and ICT is key for that, that the sustainable products and sustainable services are cheaper. Everything is about making it more competitive than the world as we know it, and the world of linear, produce, consume, throw away. And there is the power of digitalization to close the loop and to start, really planning. So what manufacturers want to do, they want to plan how much of recycled material I can get guarantees before I start ordering from wherever raw material. Ultimate goal is minimize use of natural resources. If you forget everything else I said, what can we do using ICT to minimize the use of natural resources? More recycled, maybe product as a service. Can we get all the needs that we want? Housing, healthcare, education, all the needs we want for our well-being to be served with less natural resource. That is the key. And everybody has something to contribute to that.
Thank you very much, Elias, for that. Yes, that certainly made sense. Now, let's go quickly back to Katarina and Jelkovic, because I know there is more. If you could be as brief as possible, and our dear panelists, please get ready for as brief answers as possible. Katarina.
Yes, thank you very much. Shauna asked whether the report looks at how digital technologies are being used to improve transparency and accountability in the production, use, and disposal of digital technologies. Frederick asked whether, from a governance perspective, there is any real space where the real twin challenge is being addressed. We see commitments, but not real place which is recognized as such that addresses those issues. And Atif commented that there's no doubt that the ICT increases energy consumption and carbon emission, but we have to ask ourselves how far the big tech companies can deal with this issue. Back to you, Teresa.
Thank you. Excellent questions. Pavlina, I will let you react and pick what you can complement and clarify, especially on the question from Shona, because that's directly about the report.
Yes, so Shona, we did not look at the trade implications in this report. That is, I would say, in a way beyond our métier as Diplo. So we work more with digital, but there is no question about the fact that the environment and the implementation of digital technology and solving environmental issues will have impacts on global trade. That is something which is discussed at WTO. That is something which is discussed within the EU and US and between them in a transatlantic dialogue. It goes into tariffs, it goes into taxes, it goes into CO2 emission trading. So that is something which is not in the report. However, I am quite sure in the future someone would really should pick up this topic and go into deep. What are the implementations and also geopolitical tensions? What are the implications of these changes on the global discussions? Definitely. I would also like to address the question about the correlation between the energy consumption by ICT and the environment. It is not that simple. It is not that simple that if we implement more ICT, there will be increased energy consumption. One study we looked at within the report was a study by Telefónica in Spain, which is a telecom provider company, and they run the data centers in Spain. And they, within the Corona time, meaning 2020, 2021, they have had an increase in traffic and basically push on the data centers and on their connectivity increased by 300%. Now, the overall change in their energy consumption was 2%. So there is no a direct correlation, and there are also technological ways to solve the energy consumption, which just to get into the private sector again, the Amazons, the Googles, and Microsoft, as we say in the report, are addressing. So those would be from me.
Yeah, I can complement that. I have a whole library of papers. We have a problem to admit that we don't know, but I can give you the range, quite a range that the truth is somewhere in between 2% and 4% of total emissions is due to ICT. And depending how much you take as ICT as a sector, and if anybody wants, please leave your contacts with the organizers and I can send you some of these papers. What I would like to show you, and maybe the best is to display it, I will give you concretely there's a question about how to measure and how to make sure that the electronics is it's more recycling and more circular. So I will give you again, I will just display one slide from what we do in the Commission on this. There are two ways to look at it. We have to incentivize the supply to make sure that they are circular, that they build for durability. They do make sure that there is no built-in obsolescence. And we need to tackle some of these things with legislative actions. And then there is the demand side part. We need to give the right to repair. We have to incentivize people to give back. So will have in Europe some kind of a take-back scheme, schemes to incentivize people to give it back. So we work on supply, demand, and a lot of innovation with respect to how to improve the durability of this and minimize the e-waste. And because it's very hard to recycle, the best thing you can do to prolong the life of a device, because just one phone, as you know it, if everybody could keep it for a year longer, on average in Europe we change them every 2 years. We are the worst in the world with respect to changing our devices. If everybody could keep it for 1 year longer, so instead of changing every 2, change it every 3, or if you're changing it already every 4, change it every 5, between now and 2030 is 1 million cars' lifetimes emissions. Just keep one phone. I'm not talking tablets, laptops, and others. One phone, 1 year longer, it's already huge impact. And that is something that we need to work with the consumers. But I want to tell you that we do have work at the ITU on the digital product passport for electronic devices. So if we can track and trace the electronic devices and know where they are, when they were refurbished, give them a second life, give them a third life, know where they are ending up with respect to recycling, we can improve hugely the e-waste. And not only, I mean, all consumer electronics, but also industrial electronics. Because the problem is tomorrow the e-waste of IoTs and connected smart devices. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ilias, also for this appeal. I'm afraid we will need to slowly wrap this event. So few reminders and last words from my end. You can download this report. Please do so. Please send us your feedback. Let's keep this conversation going even beyond this event. The recording of this event will be available very soon as well on our website. I would once again obviously like to thank Pavlina, the lead author, Ilias for participating in this discussion, and especially to Konrad-Adenauer-Foundation DC office. It has been a pleasure to work with you, Paul Linnert, and also with Dirk Hagen. We look for more opportunities to work together. We look for more opportunities to unpack the issues we haven't unpacked today. Thank you very much for spending the time with us, and see you soon. Bye-bye.